All right, shalom everyone, and peace of the Lord to all of you. Please invite your friends and share the link. And I notice, as usual, you guys are not doing a good job. You are not sharing, you are not inviting. And I always, as usual, I feel like I'm just working alone and people just come here for entertainment. So if you really care, download the videos, cut them pieces, share them. The whole idea of me being here is not to waste my time or your time. We are trying our best to share education so we can share the truth and nothing but the truth. And as you see, we are not doing business here. We don't have super chat. So stay in 1 hour, 2 hours. People will not shower me with money as other channels like Muslims want. Here we are fighting for the truth, and the truth will set you free. So today we will continue laughing at those who try to laugh at our belief. And here you will see how much diluted and how much they are even stupid, their argument. You see, like there are some people, they have a gray hair, but doesn't mean that you have a gray hair that means you are a wise person. Usually when people get older, you know, they are smarter and wiser, and they say things which make sense. But today you will experience yourself and you will see how and why we laugh at those so-called rabbi. This Ashkenazi self-proclaimed rabbi, yesterday we showed you who was making fun of Jesus, that he is supposedly white, and he's saying, do you think the Roman, they will accept God, he is black? But he himself, look at him. Look at him. So he is very childish, like, you know, what does have to do with the Roman and the God of the Roman? When the first people who believe in Jesus, they were the Jews. And the God of the Roman and the Roman, they were going after those Jews, Christians, to kill them and throw them to the beast. But in order to make a mockery, and this coward, they were not there to make a mockery of Muhammad, even though we got him busted, he was doing that, but, you know, not directly. But we did bust him up clearly. So he is a businessman who will never speak wrong against Muhammad, even though Muhammad, he killed his people. I mean, he is in Jerusalem right now, and we just finished 12 days war where the Islamists, they want to finish Israel. He had no problem with that, but he had a problem with Jesus. This is how coward he is. He never mentioned one word against Islamists. Never, never. If they beat him, if they throw rockets, if they bomb them, if they do suicide bombing, it doesn't matter what you do. To Weaver Singer, he saw nothing, heard nothing, because he's a businessman who go and sell diamonds in Indonesia. And as a businessman, everything for sale. And today, he tried to sell us something. Listen to him. He's going to talk about Abraham and the Holy Trinity. Go.
Isha Anoshim, Genesis 18, means 3 men, right? And those 3 men, you are to believe, are referring to the Trinity.
Well, you know, here, Ashkenazi boy, I want to ask every single rabbi between the Jews why there are 3. Like, do you think God, he do things in a stupid way? Let us say this is not the Trinity, but why there are 3? Why not 1 angel? Why not 2 angels? Why 3? I challenge you to tell the audience what is significant about the number 3. Very weird. This God, he called himself Elohim, which is not a singular word. This God, when he come, or even when he sent the angels, he sent the 3 angels, according to you, right? Those are angels. But we will examine that and see. And you will notice that every one of them, of those Ashkenazi Jews, he have different interpretation for the same verse. As an example here, this potato, he admit that one of the 3 is God. He will say that. But I will show you another so-called rabbi. He say no, there are only 3 angels. Listen carefully.
There are the three gods. Brilliant.
Brilliant
Brilliant.
or brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, you must be the brilliant to be in a channel of a kid. I mean, aren't you ashamed of yourself? You are 60 something years old. You go to a Muslim boy channel just to bash Jesus. I mean, aren't you really disgusted to be stupid? Those Muslims, they pray for your death and your people, you stupid idiot, son of Muta. And yet you go there. I mean, in your age, you go to little boy channel. How much desperate you are trying to find an audience. We will give you audience, don't worry. Brilliant. And the boy is a lesbian. You could not find even somebody except a lesbian boy. But anyway, I mean lesbian girl, sorry.
Why don't you just go to concordance and look up the word three, and every time it comes
What we will find in there, in the concord, 3, what does that mean?
up, just put in Trinity. So it collapses really big,
Really? Show us.
hard, fast. So they're saying that the three men that appeared to Abraham were the three hypostatic entities of the hypostatic union of the Trinity. Lovely. Doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't. Tell us.
Genesis chapter 19.
Uh-huh.
So instead of going to Genesis 18, let's keep going to 19. And just so you know, 18 and 19 are a continual story.
Exactly. They are a continuous story. But I wonder why you don't go to Genesis 18:1 first. I mean, why you jump? Are you a kangaroo? I mean, seriously, are you a kangaroo? If we go to Genesis 19, what will happen there? Tell us, Ashkenazi kangaroo.
Right? Two of the angels leave Abraham's presence.
Man, that's so deep. That destroyed the Trinity. Two of the angels leave? Okay. By the way, I mean, does it say they are angels or men? I mean, aren't you the stupid idiot who just quote for us from the Bible? It says the three men, and you told us to go to Concord to see what they mean. Let me go back a second. You know. You see, I was going to say to you, come to daddy, but these days, the Jews and the European, they are calling Trump daddy. Trump, he would be upset. So,
Hypostatic union of the Trinity. Lovely. Doesn't work. The hypostatic union of the Trinity. Saying that the three men that
it says the three men. So, those are three men, and there is two angels left. Oh, okay. We will continue.
appear to Abraham were the three hypostatic entities of the hypostatic union of the Trinity. Lovely. Doesn't work. Genesis chapter 19. So instead of going to Genesis 18, let's keep going to 19. And just so you know, 18 and 19 are a continual story.
True, true.
Right? Two of the angels leave Abraham's presence and go to Sodom. How do you know I'm not making that up? Please, please.
Please, please. I mean, like, just how silly, stupid. He avoided the whole topic, which is what happened in Genesis 18, to speak now about the two angels they are left. Well, you stupid donkey, isn't it you who made videos saying that God called angels in some places in the verse, in the Bible? Isn't it you? As an example, when Jacob, he wrestled with God, there it says angel. But then we find out that Jacob, he says, I saw God face to face. But in the verses says an angel. Just so stupid and so silly. Like, How many videos you have yourself, by yourself, made by yourself, speaking about God called angels or angels called God, or even Moses was called God. You know, the funny, by the way, all those videos, they appear that they are taking phone calls live from people. Those are recorded. This guy, he don't know anything. He remind me of what this guy, his name, Yusuf Estate, the Dean show. So they say like, okay, I receive a phone call now. Somebody's asking question, but you will not find usually a conversation. You will find that they play a video, the guy send a message, you know, like in his show, or a phone call, and they try to mix it like there's real live conversation. But the truth is, this is a preset topic. He put all those information in front of him in the computer. He's not talking to any real audience. And you know, this is my challenge to this donkey. Do you dare even to debate me? I mean, you speak Hebrew, I don't. You have a very strong, let us say, weakness in my side for your favor because you speak Hebrew. But I will use that word, fat boy. You say, I will bury you. So let us go to Genesis first. Hold on. I want to show you here. Tovia Sengar, he is saying that those are, one of them is the Lord, is God, and the other two, they are angels. That's what he's saying. All right? This is Jacob wrestled with a man. So again, the Bible repeat that when Jacob he wrestled with the man. In Genesis, we see that the ones who appear to Abraham are three men. I'm using the Orthodox Jewish translation, so the Ashkenazi boy will not say I'm using Christian translation. As you see, Orthodox Jewish Bible. And Hashem appeared into him. What the word appeared mean? Appeared, that means he saw him, correct? It's coming from appearance. And was Abraham in this scenario sleeping? Maybe it's a vision? No, as we see in the story. Look how other funny rabbi, he tried to fix it. So look what he say.
18 of Genesis, verse 1. And the Eternal appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. So God comes to Abraham when Abraham is in the tent.
Right.
Okay. Then it says, and he, who is that?
Abraham.
Lifted up his eyes and looked and beheld three men stood by him. Okay, now wait a minute. God is already there.
Right.
So he lifts up his eyes with God next to him, with God with him, okay, in the plains of Mamre, he lifts up, and elsewhere he sees three men.
Ah, elsewhere. So do you see, those are two Jewish rabbis. One is saying to us one of the three is only God, the rest are angels. The other one, he come with different theory, that God appeared already to Abraham, and he left his eyes, and somewhere else he saw three men. This is not what the book says. You stupid idiot, this is your translation. And the Lord appeared into him. Where? In the front of the, he was in the front of his tent, in his tent. And he lifted his eyes up and looked. And lo, there is three men stood by him, not somewhere else. So the Bible saying he appeared to him, who? The Lord. How he saw the Lord? He saw three men. So the word Lord goes to the three men, not one. So saying that, oh, already he saw the Lord. So look at the stupid, this is stupid, a kid. They have a gray hair, but they are so silly and so wicked. Imagine the Lord is already with Abraham in the tent, and Abraham, he go busy with the three men to feed them. Imagine the Lord is now with Abraham, and Abraham, he saw three men, so he ignored the Lord. He go to serve the three men. This is what he's saying, correct? Are you with me? Are you understanding what happened now? So like, hey Lord, who cares? I mean, I had three men. Like, just you stay here, stay in the tent. I will go back to you. I have three visitors. I'm going to go and do dishes and shish kebab and hummus and feed them, and I will be back to you, okay? Just don't go. I mean, it's just how stupid donkey you are. So the verses says it clearly that the Lord appeared to him. What he saw three men, not in somewhere else, you donkey. Let me play it again to show you how those people are a bunch of Ashkenazi stupid.
Okay. 18 of Genesis, verse 1. And the Eternal appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. So God comes to Abraham when Abraham is in the tent.
Right.
Okay. Then it says, and he, who is that?
Abraham.
Lifted up his eyes and looked and beheld three men stood by him. Okay, now wait a minute. God is already there. So he lifts up his eyes with God next to him, with God with him.
Also God next to him, like he is next to me, and then the three men is there. So here, like, not only this is stupid, it's an insult to God to say so. Like God is next to Abraham, like almost like they are in the same line. And there's a three men there. And now suddenly, God don't want to speak, it's the three men speaking. So if God is there, you donkey, you potato. Who need those three men? What they will do exactly? So silly and so stupid. And here you see how this guy, he's a rabbi, as he called himself, Rabbi Stuart Fedoro. I will make you stew. This is a rabbi, and this is a rabbi, and every one of them give you different story. And both of them, they are Ashkenazi. And both of them, nobody called them rabbi except themselves. If we go to Genesis 18, and we look at the conversation here, what Abraham spoke to the three men saying, Adonai, Hashem. Remember, I'm using the Jewish translation, not, let me zoom in. He called him what? Adonai. Between two brackets, Hashem, see volume 13. So when God, he appeared to Abraham, why Abraham will call anyone else Lord if there is only one Lord and the Lord is beside him? And how the angels became his lords. We continue. Is that going to stop here? No. Abraham is going to serve those three guests. He wanna make food for them. Abraham, he went all the way to Sarah, and he said to her, quickly made food, as we see in verse number 6. Obviously, Abraham is so excited for those three visitors. And here you notice that obviously Abraham and Sarah, they did not notice that this is God yet, right? Because he is just excited for guests. All right? In the beginning, it says the three men. Abraham is excited. But Abraham, he knew what Sarah do not knew. This is why he's calling Adonai. So Abraham ran, and he brought a calf, tender and tove, and gave it into the servant, and he hasted to prepare it. And here you see the rest, like preparing for food. And they said who? The three men. Why the three men are saying the same words? The three, they spoke in the same time, saying, where is Sarah? Sound like they are speaking as a one person. So imagine I'm sitting and there's two guys next to me, and when we say something, three of us, we say the same thing. It's like one brain, three mouths, right? They said who? All of them. Where is Sarah, the wife? And here we notice that those men are not just normal men, because how they knew even his wife's name? He's just a guy in a tent in the middle of nowhere. So they are coming to him specifically, and they knew about his wife. He said, certainly, I will certainly return into thee, and this time next year. Here you notice says, and he said. He said. All right. He who? Rabbi? God. Who is the one is talking? Is one of the three men. I will certainly return into thee at this next time, or next year, and your wife Sarah, she will have a son. Sarah, she was in the entrance, and she heard what he said. All right? Now Abraham and Sarah were Zukinim, like they are very old, and well stricken in age, like the age took over them, you know, like they are really, really old. So Sarah, she laughed. This person, he said something very funny. And she is saying to herself, well, I'm very grown old woman. How in the world I'm going to have, you know, a child, you know? What are you talking about? Isn't it this is mission impossible? How that can happen? Can a man do that? Can a man, he promised such a thing? Then in verse number 13, you will see again, it says, then God, he said to Abraham. Which one is God? One of those three, right? It's called Hashem. Into Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Shall I, which I am old, of a surety bear a child? Is anything too hard for Hashem? Hashem said anything is impossible for Hashem. Was that 3 men talking, or at least one of them? Yes. So this guy, when he tried to cover up, he is just a doo-doo. This guy, he tried to be smarter. He said, we go to Genesis 19, and we will find that the 2 angels, they left. In fact, you are a stupid idiot. You do not need to go to Genesis 19. You can go to Genesis 22, 18, 22. It's in the same chapter. You are a certified ignorant. But if you go in verse number 22, you will see something very nice. And the men, which men? The 3 men, turned their faces and they went toward Sodom. Still Abraham facing God. I want to teach this this rabbi. The reason he did not mention here the men, because here doesn't say the numbers of those men who left. It says here only the men turned their faces from the present of Abraham and they left. So in Genesis 19 verse number 1, make it clear how many of those men left. 2 of them. Let us go there. Not the 3. Here it doesn't show, it appears like to be the 3. It says the men, they turned their faces and they went into Sodom. So if we go to Genesis 19, and again I will use the Jewish translation, and this is the one Tovia Singer trying to prove his point that those are angels. They went away to Sodom, but Hashem still there. All right, let me and by the way, if you don't like this translation, if you are a Jew, you don't like this translation, you can choose any translation you wish. No problem with me. All right. So here in verse number 19, where it says that 2 angels, they came to the city of Sodom, and we know the rest of the story about what happened in Sodom and how then how they run even if from Sodom. And by the way, the same story is mentioned in the Quran, but is distorted as usual. Mohammed, he copies stories from the Bible and he distorts the story. If you go all the way to verse number 21, you will see here it says, and he said unto him, Hini, I have accepted the concerning these things also. The translation for me, by the way, doesn't make too much maybe it's my weak English, but doesn't make too much sense of translation. Who is the one who is talking here? You will notice that in their translation, it says here that the angel as a word angel is not mentioned. And he said to him, in verse number 20, Lut he speak to those men. And then you can read the rest of the story, which is Tovia Singer trying to bring to us to say, well, two of the three men left, and two of them, they are obviously angels. Actually, if we go to verse number 16, let me see. Yeah, the translation here, let me see if there is other Jewish translation in the same book, same website. It's kind of weird. Let us see, Jewish translation. You see, because they are not even translating, they are mixing Jewish words, I mean Hebrew words, with the English. Let us see this complete Jewish translation. Look at here. Here suddenly, here it mentioned the angels. Then if we go to verse number 20, let us see what will happen. Is different translation from, there's a little bit of different in using the words between the previous translation and translation. But anyway, that will not change anything. So the whole point is, if there are two angels, that means this is not a Trinity. But we know from the mouth of Tovia Singer himself that the word angels in the Bible used for God. And the word God is used for angels. So how now he can confirm that those are two angels, not the Bible using the word angels when he speak about God, or the opposite? Let me show you how that will work. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. Here you notice that the Bible using the word man again, the same as mentioned in Genesis 18. So the Bible used the word God, angel, and even the word Elohim, sorry, Yahweh. In fact, if we go to Genesis 18, the translation here, they are using the word Hashem. If we go to the Bible, Hebrew, and see what it says, let us go to Hebrew 18. That is Yahweh, as we see it. So here it's confirmed that this is not just a word as Lord or as God, which can be used in many places even for different purpose, to angel, or even as it's used to Moses, like Moses, you will be God and he will be your prophet, which means you will take the place to present me. Doesn't mean that he is really God. And your brother will speak in my name, presenting your speech, because you have a trouble with talking. But this is Yahweh, this is not someone else. This is not just the word God, this is Yahweh himself. If we go and check in a Jewish website, chapter 18, what is the first word appear to us? Is this one. What this one is, translation, most of translation, they are using the word Lord or God. But here we see it says Jehovah.
Jehovah.
But if you go and you can search online how the word Yahweh is written. Let me see. Do you see it? This is the word which is mentioned as the first word. Again, I don't speak Hebrew, you know, but thanks to God, we have many ways and many tools to find out what words are saying and what they are speaking about. So this is the word Yahweh, as you see it, as image. And this is the word Yahweh is mentioned here. And this is Genesis 18, as it is in Hebrew. So who is the one who appeared? It is Yahweh. And the second we say appeared, that means he is visible, not invisible. So what is the image God he appeared with to Abraham to be visible? We know that God he appeared to Moshe or Moses in Exodus 33:11. We know that Jacob mentioned the same thing. If we go to Jacob story, let us see. If we go 32. Look what happened with Jacob. Jacob, he met a man. He struggled with the man, who wrestled with the man. It says clearly a man. All right? And the man said, the man talked, the man asked. The man, look how many times the word man appeared. The man, the man, the man. All right? And the man, he wrestled with Jacob. Then some man wrestled with him until the daybreak. Some man. This is their translation, not mine. Let me zoom in more. So if we ask the Rabbi, Ashkenazi Rabbi, is this man is an angel? He will say to you, yes, it is. But let us see. So he took them. Let us see. All right. So he left alone, and some man, which means he's unknown to Jacob. This is why I say some, like somebody, wrestled with him until the daybreak. When he saw that he did not defeat Jacob, he struck Jacob's hip socket, so that his hip was dislocated while wrestling with him. The man said, let me go, because it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I won't let you go unless you bless me. Why somebody fighting with somebody when I ask him to bless me. I mean, if you're fighting, unless you bless me. Then the man asked, what's your name? And he answered, Jacob. Then the man said, from now on, you will be no longer called Jacob, but Israel. Why? Because you have shown strength to both God and men, and have prevailed. Yaakov or Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he answered, why are you asking about my name? And blessed him there. So he did not tell the name. But look what happened here. Jacob, he said that he met God face to face. And even he is using the word, I have seen God face to face. So Jacob, he saw God or saw a man? He saw a man. So when they say three men, and those three men are angels, like one of them say three angels, and the other one says one of them is God, the other two is angels. Here we notice that Jacob himself, he announced that he saw God, but yet he saw only a man. And he claimed that he saw God face to face. Yet my life spared, which means Jacob, he understood very well that the man he was wrestling with is God, who don't want to hurt him. He spared his life. He knew he's no match. But those potatoes, they keep saying it says the three men, and it says the three angels, and it says etc. This is mean that this is not God. But as we see here, Jacob never met with God. He met with man, but yet he says, I saw God face to face. Same as Moses. Moses, there, it's clearly he spoke to God. But Moses, he said that he saw God face to face. And we know the Bible says that nobody can see God the way he is and live. Correct? This is why he says, he spared my life. How he spared his life? Simply, he did not say, see God the way he is, otherwise he would be destroyed. He saw a man. So now from Genesis 18 and Genesis 32, and we can show more examples, or Exodus, every one of those who saw God, and he said, I saw God face to face, are seeing men, not God in his real image. So when those so-called rabbi trying to fix it, they say it's an angel. But here, if Jacob, he saw an angel, why he is then lying, saying, I saw God face to face? If I see an angel, I did not see God. I did not even talk to God. I just saw an angel. So look like Jacob, he is not smart like those Ashkenazi rabbi. So he saw a man, he wrestled with the man, yet he claimed that he saw a God, and he spoke with God, and God spared his name. And when God, he gave his name to him, he called him Israel. What the word Israel mean? The one who wrestled with God, the one who struggled with God. But Jacob, he wrestled with the man. Correct? Are you with me? So who is this man who can change your name to fit with you and that name will be written in heaven and in the book of God to bless your children after. Who is this man? Is that an angel? Do the angel have such an authority to claim to be God? And Jacob, he thought this is God, but he is a fool. He did not see God really, yet he claimed that he saw God face to face, but it was just a man and possibly an angel. Maybe Jacob was not a good Jew. Maybe he don't understand what God said to him. Obviously, those Ashkenazi rabbi, they understood better than Jacob, who he claimed that he saw God, but yet he did not see God. He saw an angel. But we know that is not true. Those are nowhere to be fit, even close, even to mention the name of Jacob. So this person who met with Jacob, and Jacob says, I saw God face to face. Jacob is not lying. He made it so clear that the man who I spoke to, the man who he blessed me, the man who changed my name to be the one who struggled with God or wrestled with God, he must be God. Why? Because I wrestle with man, yet my name now the one who wrestled with God. If Jacob he just wrestled with a man, then his name should be the one who wrestled with man, not the one who wrestled with God. Is my idea, guys, clear? Did we make it simple? I wish my English is better. You know, my English is limited, and the Bible is not the same as the stupid Quran. It's a very deep language, and I'm trying to avoid a word maybe it's not suitable, you know, with my limited English skills. So the text is so clear. He wrestled with man. The man told him, from now on your name is Israel, which means the one who wrestled with God. So who is this man? God. Jacob asking the man to bless him, but we know that a man cannot bless a man. I cannot bless you. I can say, may God bless you. Blessing come only from God. Even when angels they give a blessing to somebody, is the blessing of God. You ask your mother to bless you. Bless me, mother. She say, may God bless you. She can't bless you. She can't bless herself. Blessing come only from God, and there's many verses in the Bible about it. So anytime the word blessing appear, always put in your mind that this is the blessing of the Lord, not the blessing of the man, not the blessing of the angels. And then Jacob he confirmed that this man who is God, he spared my life. How he spared his life? He appeared to him as a man. This is number one. Number two, he did not destroy him. He wrestled with him friendly. In fact, he is just, you know, obviously loving Jacob, how much he is consist and how much he is, let us say, favorable for him. So the whole story here is not about God wrestling. I mean, this will be silly if you think so. This is about God examining Jacob, not by a real fight. Like, even though the text here appear that Jacob he wrestled with God, and he speak about he broke his like he make his hip loose. But this is way deeper than what you think. This is about God putting Jacob into test. But God he knew the future. God here he asked Jacob, what's your name? But there's no way God do not know what Jacob's name is. So here the story given to us as it is. Jacob do not know. He's speaking to a man, and it says even some man, like somebody suddenly appeared to him. He's a man, and he starts wrestling with him, which means he attacked him. He came to fight. Jacob never gave up, all night until daybreak. Jacob he did not fail to be the one who can resist the most time of difficulty, especially this fight is going nowhere. To the point, even the man, he said to him, let me go, let go. Jacob, he refused. And then when he did not let go, then this man, he hit him in his hips and he caused some bones loose, hurt badly. Let me go, because they break. Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So Jacob, from the first second he started encountering this man, he knew that this man is not just a man. And the proof in front of you. He knew there is something about God in this man. What does it mean? You are fighting with somebody who says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. I need your blessing. I will not let you go. So Jacob is holding hard, fighting hard to receive the blessing of God. This is what Jacob is fighting for. So the appearance is a fight, physical fight, but the reality is Jacob is starving for God's blessing. This is what the story is about. So Jacob, he wrestled all night with God for one purpose, blessing, not fight. There's no fight in the fight. All right? All right. So here we notice that when this guy, he tried to manipulate Genesis 18, he failed miserably. Because Yahweh is the one who appeared. And the second we say appear, that means he have been seen. And the second you say he have been seen, he's seen as what? All the story says to us that he see three men. And the excuse is that it says angels, like two angels left. But then you will see that Hashem was still present. Hashem did not leave. But two men only left. Guys, you understand what I'm saying? How many men left? Two. So the third one is who? Is Hashem. How that oppose the Trinity? It says they are angels, but the three of them have the same image of men. So the angels, which is used here, present still the three men, or two of them at least, and the third man is Hashem. And now they need to explain to us why the three men are one of them is God. Right? Why of them is God? So Jacob, he witnessed the same thing. He saw a man. This man is God. But we know that even the Jews, they come to you and say that Jacob, he wrestled with an angel. Even though Jacob saying, I saw God face to face. So the word angel and the word man and the word Hashem, all of them can be used in different locations. But God himself can use the word angel for himself. In fact, I mean, just to give you a little idea, what the name of God appear in Genesis 1.
The name of God that appears in Genesis chapter 1 is Elohim. This Hebrew word is translated as God in most English Bibles. While Elohim is plural in form, when it refers to the one true God in Genesis chapter 1, it is used with singular verbs, indicating a singular divine being. Many scholars interpret this as a plural of majesty or a hint at the Trinity. It emphasizes God as the powerful and majestic creator.
Let us ask the question again, just to show you how funny the internet. Is the word Yahweh appear in Genesis 18:1?
Yes, the Hebrew word for Yahweh, YHWH, Yehovah, appears in Genesis chapter 18, verse 1, while most English translations render it as the Lord, in all caps, to distinguish it from Lord, Adonai. The original Hebrew text uses the tetragrammaton, YHWH, which is commonly pronounced as Yahweh by scholars. This verse explicitly states, "The Lord appeared to Abraham," referring to God himself.
All right. Lala Quinn saying, how come your Jesus changed his name in your book? I don't know what you are talking about, Lala Queen. I mean, you are a stupid Muslim talking about God and name change. In your book, his name is Isa. And we never heard of Isa before. Not a single Christian ever heard of this name before. So don't talk about name change. So, first of all, in the whole Bible, by the way, there's no name. Yahweh is not a name. When Moses, he asked God, what's your name? What I will tell my people. He did not give him a name. He told him, I am who I am, which means I'm the one exist by my own. That's not a name. For you, because you are an ignorant and you do not speak the language, you think it's a name. The same as Ahmed did that. He was laughing at the story of Jacob, that he was wrestling with God. But the stupid did that. He forgot that the word Israel exists in his Quran tons of times, which means the Quran agree with the story of Jacob wrestling with God. This is why he have the name. In fact, if you go to the stupid Quran, you will not find one place it mentioned the story of Jacob wrestling with God, but yet suddenly Jacob, his name became Israel, and nowhere in the Quran explain how the name of this man changed. No Muslim can explain to us who is even Israel in the Quran. Suddenly this name appear everywhere. Israel, 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 Israel. Like, who is Israel? So the Bible is the book of truth. Introduce for us the information in a very accurate way. How Jacob became Israel. The story in Genesis 32 is so easy. But we go to the stupid Quran. Here we go. Children of Israel. Who is Israel? Have you ever heard of an author, he introduced a person to the story without telling us who is this person suddenly? How we can know from the Quran that Jacob is Israel? ما في معلوم, exactly. This is a book, the Quran, written by an Indian boy from Bombay, a Muslim boy. Brother and sister, the Quran did not say that Jacob his name became Israel. However, brother and sister, if you go to the Bible, you open Genesis number 32, you will see that the Bible says that God, he called Jacob, that your name will be changed and you will become Israel. Like, Abdul, this is our Bible. If the Quran is the book of God, should be independent, should be a book by itself. It turned to be that the God of Islam cannot. Like, do you Muslim consider the Bible as part of your book? No. If the Muslim consider the Torah and the Gospel is part of their book, then I can say, okay, you know what? It is. So they are not using different book. It's the same. No, they don't. They make mockery of the Torah. They make mockery of the Jews. They make mockery of the Christian. All they corrupted the Torah and the Gospel. This is what they say. But the second you ask them a sensitive question, they scratch their butt and they try to find the answer from it, from our book. How our book is corrupted, you donkey, and then you cannot find who is Israel from your book. And then the children of Israel, obviously it's a man. Children of Israel, children of Israel, children of Israel. In chapter 3, verse number 93, it says that all food was made lawful for Israel, including pork, yes. So how pork became bad later? No explanation. Well, just suddenly, Jacob, he eat all food, except what he forbid himself from eating, which means the food he don't like. It's not God who told him not to eat this or that. In Genesis 32, Tovia singer, he tried to fix it. So Jacob, he was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak.
This struggle with an angel.
See, he just said an angel. Guys, did you hear it? Did he say it is an angel? He said that, right? If it's an angel, so why Jacob saying, I saw God face to face? It was an angel. We heard Tovia singer saying clearly, he struggled with an angel. If we ask Tovia singer, where here it says the word angel? Like in the beginning of the chapter, the word angel appear. Like, you know, if you go to verse number, 3, 2, you will see it. But this is not. This is later. A man appeared to him. All right? Here. Do you see? But this is now not the same story. And then the story continue, and then a man, he appeared to him. Not an angel. It doesn't say the word angel. But Tovia singer, in order to make it fit with his explanation, it is now an angel. And by the way, I have no problem to see an angel, but this angel obviously is God. Right? So look how hypocrite they are. An angel, even though the verse says a man. God spoke to Abraham. They say those are 3 angels. But the Bible says it clearly that 2 angels left and 1 stay, and that is Hashem. Here is the same story, a man, just 1. And this one, he came to Jacob, and he was called here only as a man. The word angel is not showing. And this is his translation.
2, where Jacob has this struggle with an angel, he ultimately has to face his adversary head on, as the Jewish people would have to repeatedly. There's a caveat here that requires explanation.
Okay.
The Torah and the prophets that follow use expressions, idioms that we would never use today. And if you're not familiar with this, you will find yourself terribly lost. We find in the Torah that those who represent God are called God. We would never do this as those who worship God, those who are monotheists, who worship the true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In our convention,
Guys, did you see how stupid this idiot he's saying now? He was explaining what? The story of Jacob, right? Isn't it true? Where in the story of Jacob, the guy, this man, he says, I'm God. Jacob is the one who he said, I saw God. Face to face. Face to face. So when he claimed that in the Torah, sometimes the word used in a place for people who represent God or an angel, that is a stupid of you to say, even if it's true, because the story here doesn't fit. So he tried to bring you other example from different place to fix his theory, which is against the Bible teaching word by word. Because if it was someone represent God, that means Jacob never spoke to God, never saw God, and Jacob here is lying. Why Jacob don't say, I saw the face of an angel? Why he's saying God? Oh, he represent God? That is not a statement of a truth then. Either I saw God or I did not see God. And how he was spared? He was spared by the man or by God? By God, which is the man. And this is why actually he lived. Because if we see God the way he is, you will die. He will be destroyed. It's very stupid that somebody claimed to be a rabbi and he tried to go to different verses far away from the topic, out of context, and trying to place them in the same place. So let us repeat the questions. Maybe this funny so-called self-rabbi, he can explain to us. If anyone have a connection to him, ask him, why 3 men appear? Now we know that Jesus says before Abraham, I am, right? And Abraham, he saw my day and he rejoiced for it. So obviously Jesus is making it clear that he was one of those 3. Correct? Now, we cannot take the Jews like into a corner, says, oh, this is Jesus said that, so you have to believe in it. Well, they don't believe in Jesus. But here we have a question no so-called rabbi can answer. Why God came to Abraham when nobody can see God the way he is? So how he appeared to him? Is the Bible here describing something truthful happened, or it was a delusion? No Jewish rabbi will dare to say it's a delusion. It's true. So he appeared to him, and this is a physical appearance. In fact, the other rabbi, he says to him, he said to us, he was next to him.
Okay. 18 of Genesis, verse 1. And the Eternal appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. So God comes to Abraham when Abraham is in the tent.
Right.
Okay. Then it says, and he, who is that?
Abraham.
Lifted up his eyes and looked and beheld 3 men stood by him.
Sorry for that.
Okay, now wait a minute. God is...
So, God, did he say God came to him? Did he say the word God came to him? He said that, right? God came to him. Came. Because appeared can be vision. Right? I can say Jesus appeared to me as a vision. Appear, maybe it's a vision. But now, this rabbi, he got himself busted by saying the truth. That God came. Not only just appear, he came. He came as what? Do he dare to answer? As long he came what? He came as a spirit. He came, and then he says he came to him and he was next to him. Listen carefully.
18 of Genesis, verse 1. And the Eternal appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. So God comes to Abraham when Abraham is in the tent.
Right.
Okay. Then it says, and
in the plain of Mamre. That's a good one, isn't it?
he, who is that?
Abraham.
Lifted up his eyes and looked and beheld 3 men stood by him. Okay, now wait a minute. God is already there.
Right.
So he,
I mean, how silly, how stupid. The story, the whole story is about God appeared to Abraham. So why the 3 men is there if God is already there? Who need those 3 men? What they would do? If God is there, if the king himself is there, who care for those 3 men? It's just silly, it's just stupid. They are so desperate to get away from it. So this is my question to all so-called Jewish rabbis, if there's any is listening. Why there are 3? Is the Bible trying to help the doctrine of the Christians about the Trinity? Why 3? Was it an incident? Like God don't mean it? He made a mistake? Why 3 came to Abraham? And why each rabbi give you different answer? One saying one of them was God, the other ones, the other 2, they were angels. This guy is saying all the 3 they were angels. And why the angels are men? And why the Bible here in Genesis 18, it says clearly that Hashem was talking. One of the 3 men, he was talking, and Sarah, she was in the door of the tent, saying that you will have a son. How silly, how stupid, how arrogant. 2 of them they left, and Hashem he stayed. 2 of the men are left, and Hashem he stayed. So who is the other 2? So the 3 are having a form of men. 3 are equal men. There's no differentiation between the 3 in appearance. The 3 they say it to Sarah, the men, the 3 of them they speak in the same time. This is the Jewish translation, read carefully. He lifted up his eyes and looked, Hinai Shalosh Anashim, 3 men. If we go here, this is Isaiah. Isaiah 6:3. Here it mentioned Quddus, 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 or Quddus, Quddus, Quddus. And this is the word, by the way, the Quran copy too. If Hashem, the one who appeared to Abraham, and those 3 is not one of them, Abraham, no way he will leave the Lord himself and will go after 3. So they try to fix it, they make it a blind. He appeared. How he appeared if those are not 3 men? those false rabbis cannot explain. The other rabbi, Tovia, so-called rabbi, he make it different. He said one of them is Hashem, but now we have an evidence from the mouth of this Tovia singer that God, he came to Abraham as a man. Correct? So imagine here, I can search in the internet and you will find that every so-called rabbi, those are self-rabbis, they don't have synagogue, they don't have anybody, they are nobody. Every one of them, he give you different interpretation for the same phrase, the same word, the same sentence, the same chapter. But nobody can explain how God become a man.
He's open Genesis 19 verse 1. So Genesis 18, 1 and 2, but we seem to have forgotten about Genesis 19, 1 and 2. Those are angels. They're not hypostatic entities.
But he is the same one who says that God can be called angel too. I mean, do you see how stupid they are? So he's trying to prove that when we say angel, we mean angel. But the same potato, he says, when we say God, sometimes we don't mean God. When we say angel, we don't mean angel. When we say anything, doesn't mean it's what you think. So going by his own stupidity, when he mentioned that God says to Moses, you will be God and he will be your prophet, he say, well, doesn't mean that he's God, and I agree. So the language, based on your stupidity, you idiot, does not prove your point, because you yourself, you said that God sometimes speak as an angel. God sometimes he speak as a man. Even he call himself a man, yet he is God. And this is what you did in your explanation. God in the Bible, where there it says that God, he says, I am Yahweh. Did he say I am Yahweh? No, it says Yahweh spoke to Abraham. Yahweh appeared to Abraham. It's not God said to Abraham, I am Yahweh, I am Hashem, I am Adonai. Very silly and very weak, stupid argument of a fool. Any question? You know, we can go, there is tons of reference, you know, to speak about those. You know, as an example, Joshua. Joshua in chapter 5, verse number, I think 13. 13, let me check. I don't want to make a mistake. But anyway, so Joshua, he, a man he appeared to him. Who is the one who appeared to Joshua? A man. Let me get the verses. Hold on. Let me open first here. Give me a minute. All right. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man. Who? A man. Over against him, with his sword drawn in his hand. Joshua went into him and said unto him, Art thou for us, or like our enemy? Who is this man holding the sword? Are you? Are you from the enemy, or you are a friend? What the man, he said to him, Nay, I am not from you. I'm not, I'm not from you. But as the captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. So what this man, he said to him, I am not from your enemy, and I am not from you, but I am the commander of the army of God, the captain of the army of God. Then he fell down in his face, and he did worship him. And he said to him, What says my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord host said unto Joshua, Loose these shoes from off the foot, for the place is a holy ground. Why the place is a holy ground? Anyone remember a story like this? If you remember, even in the Quran, when Moses, again, Moses is copying the Bible, right? I am your God. God says to Moses, chapter 20, verse number 11, 12, 13. I am your God. When Moses came to the bushes, the burning bushes, he said to him, Verily, verily, I am your God. Take off your shoes. You are in a sacred ground. Wonderful. So why Moses will take off his shoes? Because there is the presence of God. But as we see, it says here that he is the captain of the Lord. So who is this captain? Where he present, the ground is holy. So we can show you tons of examples will make such a person like Tovia singer a shish kebab. What a silly rabbi. And the same story appear in Exodus 33, verse number 11, where Moses says he spoke to God face to face. And even he spoke to him as a man, which will defeat Islam anyway, because the Muslim, they say that God of Moses did not appear to Moses. Moses could not see God. But the Old Testament says that, as you see in Exodus 33, that God, he spoke to Moses face to face, even he spoke to him as his friend. In the same book, in the same chapter, let me go there. I'm zooming in so you can read with me. Exodus 33. All right. So in verse number 11, And the Lord God, he spoke into Moses face to face, as a man speaks into his friend. What the phrase here present to us, that Moses, he spoke to someone who is obviously God, but this God, he was very humble. He did not come with his glory. He humbled himself. Sound familiar? So God, he humbled himself. He took the flesh of a human being. God, he humbled himself, and he come in the flesh of a human being. So God, he came to Moses in a humble way. Otherwise Moses would be destroyed. God, he spoke to Moses face to face as a man. As what? As a man. Speak into his friend. Then if you go in the same chapter, you will see it says in verse number 20 that nobody can see the face of God. And he said, thou cannot see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. How we can manage both together? He saw God face to face, and no man can see me. Did he see him or he did not? He did. But he did not see God the way he is. Otherwise he will not live. All right? How stupid you are, so-called, self-called Rabbi. You know, like each time they try to get out of a hole, they find themselves in different hole. Do we need more proofs? And we can go to Daniel, we can go to many places, and we will go through the same thing. Like if you go to the book of Judges, the angel of the Lord, he appeared to Gaidun. But this angel, he speak as God. Let me find it. Hold on. I'm just trying to remember which chapter. Okay, hold on. All right. Let us see. And again, we can use the Jewish translation or any translation you wish. Here you see the story. Then the angel of Adonai Who is this person? The verses make it so clear that this is the angel of Adonai. So now there's no doubt that this is an angel. It says the angel of Adonai. Doesn't say Adonai, it says the angel of Adonai. Right? Is it possible to see the angel of Adonai and live? For sure, he's an angel. Right? Because the Bible says God is the one you cannot see him the way he is. So in verse number 21, again it repeats that this is the angel. In verse number 22, look what he said. I wish they don't have this type of thing appear in the screen, block our text. I'm not sure if there's a way to block it. That Gaidun, he realized that he was the angel of Adonai, and he says, "Oh my Lord, oh no, my Lord Adonai." What he call him? Read carefully. Oh no, my Lord Adonai. But you see here, it keeps saying angel. Angel of Adonai. Angel of Adonai. So why he's saying, oh no, my Lord Adonai? Because I have seen the angel of Adonai face to face. And look what happened here. But Adonai now speaking, saying to him, Shalom to you. Don't be afraid. You won't die. When a person will die, if he see God face the way he is, right? As we saw in Exodus. Nobody can see God face and live. So here he realized that he is going to, he's dead. That's it. He just saw face of who? An angel. So why he's worried if he see a face of an angel? Because simply here, the one obviously there is God. Adonai reassured him, Shalom to you. Don't be afraid. You won't die. Then Gaidun, he built an altar for Adonai, called Adonai Shalom. So here we see that the word angel repeated again and again. Suddenly, the angel is speaking as Adonai. Suddenly, this man, he was terrified for saw an angel face. Well, obviously he noticed that he just saw and he spoke to God. And when he noticed that he is speaking to Adonai, and the one in front of him is Adonai, right away he feared and he repented, saying, oh my Lord Adonai, because I have seen the angel of Adonai face to face. But Adonai reassured him, Shalom to you. He gave him peace. Don't worry. If this is an angel only, why he will fear death? We have many stories in the Bible about angels coming, you know, even in the New Testament, speaking to Mary. Was Mary terrified when she saw an angel? She will die? No. She saw them face to face. Muhammad himself, he claimed that he saw the angel Jibreel in his real image twice. So it's possible to see, even in the cult of Muhammad, to see an angel and nothing will happen to you. So why I will die if I see an angel? Shall we share more reference, or we have enough? Somebody saying CP is watching Anthony Roger. You must be a stupid idiot. I have no time to watch anybody except somebody I want to refute. You're a donkey. Like, this information is only Anthony Roger, he knew it? Just so silly, so stupid, so dummy. You know, Anthony Roger. Look like there's nobody knows. I mean, you stupid donkey. This is the Bible. It's available for everybody. Available for you too. But look like you are the one who learned from watching others, not from your own. Aren't you? Potato. I watched Donald Trump too, you know. Actually, in my lifetime, I don't remember even watching Anthony Roger videos. The only time I saw him when they mentioned my name, when they went, maybe other video, maybe, when they went to Uthman. I don't even know his name. What a dummy. Any Abdul? Any Rabbi? And no problem, by the way, learning. I mean, nobody is born educated, right? We learn from, like, you go to school, somebody is a man or a woman, they teach you how to say the first letter. Nobody is born with his knowledge. So it's not like, you know, oh, he learned from this. This is stupid of you to say. But I understand you're trying to put me down, supposedly. I'm watching somebody video. No, I don't. I watch only if I want to get the person busted. Otherwise, there's no point for me to watch any Christian video. What he will tell me something, like what exactly he will help me in my mission to fight Islam? Nobody. When it's come to Islam, I am the master of all. In the Bible, I can't claim the same. I'm not a person who is a scholar in the Bible, but I have enough confidence in my Lord that his book is enough to guide me, even though I don't have PhDs or scholars degree paper in the wall on the Bible. For God, when he spoke to all his disciples, none of them he have a PhD. None of them he went to Bible study school and he got his master degree. They were fishermen. They were, Paul, he make tents. You know what making tents? They don't have the PhDs and degrees. Yet they were the masters of education for us. And they are the disciples, like even the masters, they are disciples, because they have only one master, that is the Lord. So they are the masters, are the word rabbi, of education for the Christians, but they themselves, they learn from the real master. So the Lord, he is the one who he teach you, and all the knowledge we have is coming from him. It doesn't matter what our names is. And not only that, when we grow in knowledge, I might say something today. After 20 years from now, I learned a lot more. I can maybe make it even better because now I am more educated. Knowledge is not something you can earn and finish. It is non-stop process. In fact, any verse in the Bible you read, you yourself, you read the same verse, you can read it for the coming 20 years. Each time you read it, you will get something new in your heart. And that is the power of this book. Some people, they read it as if they are reading book of history, but we as a Christians, we don't see, even though it mentions history of men, like here the story of this person. It's a history still, but it's a history which is involve God. And when God he speak, we listen. Do we have anyone he oppose? Any Abdul? My friend, it's not about you trying to put me down, but your comment is not in the place. This is number one. Number two, I don't think there's a person who is the most knowledgeable, including me, about the Trinity or about God, and I will explain to you in a very simple way. If you believe that God is a miracle, then it's very silly of anyone to claim that he can explain God. Can you explain miracles? You cannot. So this is why we call it miracles, right? So when we try here to explain the scriptures, because God, he gave us the scriptures to explain himself in a simple way. Otherwise, no man explanation can explain God. How God can say, let be light, and light was? Explain that to me. Give me all the interpretation you can come with. Let be light. Then you will say to me, oh, he's almighty, right? So can we explain the almighty of God by anything except saying he's almighty? So when we say almighty, it's like we give up. We are not really explaining, right? We give up. We just surrender to the meaning because we are overpowered. Let us say even violently, because you are born to die violently. Your mom, she gave birth to you violently, blood, pain. You die. You struggle, you don't want to die, you want to live. So God power, almighty God, he overpower you. So how we explain the power of God? We give up. We say he's almighty. Otherwise, anyone he think he can explain God, he is a fool. And he is a hypocrite. The only question is if the God you speak of is it true or not. Like the Muslim, they believe Allah is God. But the second we put Allah into examination, we will find in 2 minutes that Allah cannot be God. In fact, I'm willing to open my Discord, and you guys later you can download this video and cut the part exposing this guy, what his name, Tovia singer, and the other false rabbi. Cut it, and then we can make the part speaking to the Abdul in different session. Or maybe I should go offline and come back in 2 hours. What do you think, guys? Should I go take a break? Let us do this. I will set up to make it like a short, so people they can download this video by itself. I will set up live for 2-3 hours from now. What do you think, guys? This way I can rest my throat. You cannot deny contradiction in the scriptures. Well, you can say whatever you want, but you see the contradiction appear only because you don't have knowledge. The second you know the knowledge, then you will find yourself a fool, that this is not a contradiction. But if you are an idiot, you are limited. Like now, if I go, just to show you an example, I will search online atheist Bible contradiction. You see, I just type the word, I don't know what I will see, who will appear to me, and what they will say in their, you know, in their sites or in their statement. All right, let me see. I search for atheist. Actually, I search for atheist Bible contradiction. I see Christian websites. Very funny. What is the atheist website? Let us try again. Contradiction. Okay, I just found the website finally. Just to show you an example of the stupidity of atheists. I did not read this website before. I don't know what is there, you know. Hey, here we go. American atheist. You made me fart before I start. The Sabbath day. Here it's what? It's about Bible contradiction, correct? Bible contradiction. Sabbath day. Remember the Sabbath day to keep holy. Exodus 28. Okay. One man estimeth one day above another. Another estimeth every day. Alike, let every man be fully pursued in his own mind. Romans 14:5. How that is contradiction for the Sabbath? Let me get you busted. Jesus said, Sabbath is made for the man, not the man was made for Sabbath. You keep the Sabbath, for this is made for the man, not for God. And every day, which is the man he devout to God, is called Sabbath too, which means holiday. So there is no contradiction there. And we can show you from the Old Testament, even like David, he ate from the bread of the temple on Sabbath, which is forbidden, because he was hungry. What if somebody need emergency? What if somebody want to go to hospital? The Israelis, they were attacked in Saturday. They don't send ambulance. They don't help. They don't open surgery. So people are stupid, and obviously they are ignorant about what the Bible says. The performance of earth. The earth abide forever. The elements shall melt with fervent heat, and the earth also the works that therein shall be burned up. So now he's saying how it is going to be forever and how it's going to be destroyed. Which one? You see, when somebody read for you something, a verse, go to the verses and read them, and you will see why we laugh at them. I will go there and I will open the chapter. Remember, this is supposedly contradiction. Right? This is contradiction. And this is verse number 4. Do you see how they lie in the translation? They cut the sentence out of context and they make it something else. Generation comes, generation goes, but the earth remain forever. Forever here does not mean for eternity. That means people goes, people come, and the earth is stay. Generation after generation. This is not about the God when he's saying the earth will stay eternal. It's just a very silly argument. Very, and this is why actually they do the same as the Muslims. They cut the first part of the sentences because that will expose them. So people come, people go, the earth stay. The earth is the land. The earth is not dying. People die. But doesn't mean that the earth is going to be eternal, for only God is eternal. And this is why Jesus says, the earth when the heaven will be destroyed, will be demolished, but my word will not. Very silly atheist as usual. Seeing God. I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Genesis 32:30. Okay, what about you read the same chapter? And then, no man has seen God at any time. Just to show you how they are dishonest again. No man seeing God the way he is. Why you don't post the whole verses? What will happen if they post? I mean, are they trying to save ink? Is that the purpose? Why we are just posting a part of it as the Muslim they do? Because simply the whole point of this is deception. Read it. They cut the first part because the first part will prove them wrong, and they posted only a little portion of it, which is not even there. No one has ever seen God but the only and the unique Son, the Son of God. This is the Jewish Bible translation, by the way. So nobody saw God the way he is and he can live, but there is only one person, that is the Son. Because the Son of God can see the God the Father the way he is, and he can live. But no man can do that. So what they claim to be contradiction is a joke. And you will notice that the same verses refute their stupidity. A human sacrifice. Guys, look at this. This is a human sacrifice. Where anyone can show me where here it says a human sacrifice? Let us go to the verses so we can laugh at the stupidity and the lies of those people. Human sacrifice. I like that. It says the opposite. I bet you this website written by Kamala Harris. So this is the human sacrifice? Hilarious. Where is the human sacrifice? I want to go and see it. Please show me, the atheist. Where? What a bunch of donkeys. Sorry, donkeys, I apologize. This is the first time I apologize from donkeys, by the way. I mean, or even the Abdul, they don't come with this. I bet you the one who made this website, he have a ring in his anus, and his assistant, she have a ring in her vagina, and she have earring everywhere, in her clitoris, in her tongue, in her lips, and now she found a human sacrifice, but they are the one who do abortion. Sacrifice their own kids just to have sex, excuse my language, to be effed, literally, and not to be responsible for the effing they do. And yet they talk about a human sacrifice. Excuse my language, I am savage, I know, I'm an Arab. But those people, they understand one language. See, when you speak to such kind of people in a nice way, they take advantage of you. Say those Christians are nice. Do you notice that atheists, they don't go ballistic on Muslims? Do you know why? Because they calculate their numbers. Muslims are, violent. I might insult their prophet, he might kill me. But I can call Jesus all names. Christians will not kill me. As simple as that. In fact, atheists, they join together with Muslims. Like now, the Democratic Party, they named a Muslim to be the mayor of New York. But this guy is left. He loved gays and lesbian. And he himself, I think, is a gay. I mean, how he is a Muslim, and he is with the lefty, and then they say he's a Muslim, he made a speech in the mosque. You see, they find in a Muslim, let us say, like a web, the web, like the spider web, something have fluffy lines. They think if they go behind it, they will be unseen. So we will not see their private parts no more. But you cannot hide behind a naked Muslim. This guy is exposed already. He's a false Muslim. He's a hypocrite Muslim. He's a satanic Muslim. According to his prophet. Not to me. Yet he called himself Muslim, and the Muslim call him Muslims. And you call him Muslims. So obviously all of you are a bunch of donkeys. You do not know what Muslim mean. According to Muhammad, the one who is a homosexual must be killed. But he go and he hug the gays and he dance with them in the festival. Yet you ask him, he say, I'm a Muslim. What the heck? A bunch of hypocrites. A bunch of prostitutes. This is a form of prostitution. If a Christian person, he says to you that he have no problem, he have nothing to no, like he hold no problem with the teaching of homosexuality, he's a fake Christian. We know what the Bible says. As simple as that. He is a big fat liar. He is no Christian. You will see someone dressed as a priest and he is a gay. He is a big fat liar. He has nothing to do with Christianity. And he is a fraud. So we Christian, we are willing to say things as it is. Muslims are hypocrite. They go in the West, they kiss the ass of LGBT just to get election, just to get a job. You have no dignity. Like your prophet. Right? We don't speak politically correct to make you happy. We care for what our Lord said, not what you think, and not what you like me to say. Who care what you think and what you like me to say? God, when He taught us how to live, He taught us how to die. Not only how to live. And a person who is not willing to die for what he lived for, he don't live. That means you are just an animal who just want to eat and drink. You don't live for anything. But a person who lives for something, he will have no problem, even if it's wrong, by the way. He have no problem to die for what he lived for. So if a person says, I live to protect my family, my children, this is the purpose of my life today. He's willing to die for his family. But atheists are not willing to die for anybody because they are atheists. They believe that they are animals, and the purpose of their life is just to eat and have sex and to scream at Donald Trump. Right? Ali, he is a Muslim, and he is saying, if God, why you are saying that you're God, Ali? Why you are saying that to Allah? Aren't you aware that Allah can erase your face and put your mouth in your anus, as the Quran says? I bet you, Ali, you don't have face, neither anus. Is that correct? So I might be back. Let me see. Now the time is almost 2:30 p.m. So what do you think, guys, if I come back to take some calls from Abdul's? Maybe I will not stay long, but maybe like an hour or so. All right, to take some calls. Depends on how many Abdul's we will have to call us, you know. If we have many Abduls, we can stay longer. What do you think? In 3 hours? Okay, let it be in 3 hours. Or in 3 hours. You see, I noticed that when we come online like late at night, we get more Abduls, I think, from the Middle East. What do you think? Not sure really. What do you think, huh? Yeah, and you know, I have some funny comment posted in the previous videos by Muslims. Like one of them, he says, OCP did not even go 15 minutes. He did not even watch the whole videos, and look what he is saying. He will not talk about the whole video. You stupid Abdul. The guy you invite him for the video, you call it video, he said it all. He said Muhammad is a fraud. The story of Mary is a lie in the Quran. Mary, she was not a virgin. Jesus is not a prophet. Muhammad obviously is a liar. And you bring him just because you want him to bash the Trinity. It doesn't work this way. You have to take the whole package, all the shit together. And you Muslims, you are willing to take all kind of shit because you're a piece of shit just to fight Christianity. So you join forces with the one who give finger to Allah and his prophet, and he is now, his army is attacking Gaza. And he speaks to you from Jerusalem, and you have no problem with it. A bunch of hypocrites. If Tovia singer, he called me, do you think I will speak to him the way you Muslims speak to him? Who is the one who kiss? And then he says, oh, Christian Prince, he is kissing the ass of the Zionist. Who is the one who kissed the ass of the Zionist? I am the one. First of all, this guy is not a Zionist. It is you Muslims who buy his books. You praise him for he attacked Christianity, but during the time he attacked Christianity, he shuffled all the shit of his words on your prophet, because everything he say against Christianity will go against your so-called Muhammad. But because you are so desperate to bring victory, which never happened, you are desperate even to bring a Jew to join you in the fight against Christianity. This is how bad your situation is. A Jew. While your Quran says that the most enmity to the Muslims is those who call themselves Jews, and the most loving to the Muslims is those who they call themselves Christians. Which mean, you Muslims, you prove the Quran to be false. It turned to be the Jews are the most friend to you, and the Christians are the most enemy to you. Otherwise, why you join a Jew against Christianity? Huh? There's no reason. Except you find yourself bankrupt and you are trying to find a helper. Is that your Quran? The most strong in enmity to the Abdul is those who they call themselves Jews and the pagan, and the most nearest and loving to the Muslims is those who call themselves Christians. So what the Muslim bankrupt they do? They go to the Jews, who supposedly the most enemy of the Muslims, to fight the nearest loving to the Muslims. It looked like our love beating the hell of you. So let me make it clear, I love to wipe the floor with Muhammad. This is how I show my love to Muslims. So we can save them from going to hell. The God who promised you endless penis, he must be a penis God. You worship a penis God. All his promises is about your penis. Endless penis, endless vagina, endless orgasm, 70 years orgasm. You are a penis worshipper. You Muslim don't follow God for the sake of God. You follow God for the sake of your penis. If I attend a party and the party promised me a reward, and that's why I came to it, I'm not coming to the party, I'm coming to the reward, correct? If there's a gathering and I decide to go because there is a reward, no problem. I have no problem with the reward, by the way. But when the reward is all about effing, penis size, vagina size, Muhammad, he says, وَفَرْجٌ يَسَعُ ذَلِكَ, and a vagina fit with that endless penis. And this is authentic, by the way. That means everyone who attend the party, he have a problem with his penis. He have a peanut. So he's a dream to have a pre-penis. So I am going to join this religion because this religion will give me a big penis. Finally, the problem will be solved. Right? Finally, it is solved. Okay. Shibabi, CP, read those verses. Galatian, just okay, listen. Shinabi, are you willing to call me right now in Discord to read those verses for me? If I open Discord for you? Are you willing to call me right now? I was going to go offline, but I am willing to stay so you can call me and read them. And if we prove you wrong, you apologize and you call yourself a donkey. And you have to open your camera for me because I want to have this documented. Is that fair, guys? So are you willing to come and prove me wrong that those verses you are quoting for me, they have contradiction? And the one condition, you open your camera and we want to record it. And if we prove you wrong, for sure not, you are right, you must be sure, right? I mean, look, you keep repeating this, it's not stop. And if you prove us wrong, I will say I'm a donkey. If I prove you wrong, you will say live on camera that you are a donkey. I'm not going to ask you to walk with four, no. Just say it live on camera. Why you stop texting? What happened? A second ago you have a diarrhea. What happened to your diarrhea? You stopped texting. They are the same like little, little cockroach, The second you turn the light on, the cockroach go and run. No, no, I don't want you to post. I want you to read it for us. What do you mean to post? Already you posted, you stupid idiot. Are you mental? Already you posted the verses you are talking about. I want you to come and read it for us. You are just a potato. Every atheist is a stupid. Not a single one of you is not. As simple as that. So do you want to come and talk to me or not? Even though this is not my topic, you know. Potato. All right. So guys, I will finish here and I will be back maybe in 2 hours, maybe 3, maybe more. I'm going to set up the time. You check it out. I will post in Patreon that I'm going live again. And we will call it debating the Abduls maybe. What do you think? Abdul, call me. Who is a Muslim can defend Islam? Any Muslim? We Muslims, we believe in one God. Who cares if your God is 1, you idiot, or 3 or 5 or 6? The question is, he real or not? If God, he says he is 10, you blindly will say yes. If Muhammad says Allah is 100, you will accept. A bunch of hypocrite. So who cares if he is 1 or 7, 11? But can your God prove to be God? Obviously that is a mission impossible. In fact, he proved to us that he is not even a teenage. The Quran cannot even be written by a teenage boy. Even Aisha, she will do better. Okay, Shinnibu, okay. Just take a hike. You are flooding the text with the same stupid thing. You are just admitting. Don't get married. If this is what you will do with your wife to have a baby, you will never have a baby. You keep pasting the same stupid thing in the chat. So imagine this guy, his wife, she is naked, and now this is his first night sleeping with her. His wife, she opened her legs, and he keeps saying to her, open your legs. Open your legs so we can make babies. Open your legs so we can make babies. You stupid, her legs is open since last night. So obviously you cannot make babies like Muhammad. But you keep asking for the legs to be open. It's like the Iranian regime. They say, if you are a man, come to us. They came to you. Like Hamas. If you are a man, Jews, you are a coward, come to us. We came to you. Where are you? Rat, rat, rat. And then begin the war to stop Israel from their aggression and stop America. And now you kiss this ass of Trump to do negotiation. What a bunch of potatoes. You are heroes when there's nobody around. You are a rat when Mr. Around is there. What a stupid people. He just get off of short bus. I'm not sure what that word mean. This is new for me. Short bus, what short bus mean? I'm not sure, really. You know, English is not my first language, so I'm not sure what that mean. But anyway, short bus, long bus, who care, my friend? We bust them here. We throw Muhammad and the atheist under the bus. Like you speak to an atheist, what the atheist will say to you? Like they said to me, why you don't debate an atheist? About what? To prove to me that he's a monkey? Okay, you are a monkey, you won. There's nothing to debate about. And if an atheist want to debate me to prove to me that God does not exist, how stupid you are. How you can prove something not exist, not to be exist? Are you stupid? I'm going to prove to you that not exist is not exist. What? Yes, I can prove to you that the not exist is not exist. Huh. That's deep. Did you think about it before? Yes, for long. With who? With the has been burdened by what has been? Oh, your situation is getting worse. Yeah. The most silly, stupid people out here. This is why they are lost. This is why they are so stupid. This is why their society is corrupt to the bones. Unbelievable. So guys, I will be back in a few hours. Check my page. We will be live again, and maybe 2 or 3 hours from now we will see. And then until then, download the video, share it with your friends, and we pray that the truth will be shared with everybody, and those liars always will be exposed. And I hope more of you, you will learn the Bible, and so you can do way better than me. Humbly, I am not a scholar in the Bible. However, my Lord is my guideline. Our book is written for the simple, for the poor, not for those who they have PhD. The Lord is very easy to understand, and the Word of God is the easiest to understand. If you are reading from your heart, you will find the information you are looking for. But those who hate Jesus, they are not reading to read. They are reading to mock. You see, when we speak about Islam, I'm not reading, I did never read the Quran just because I want to mock Muhammad. No. When I start reading it, I said to myself, maybe this is a good religion. Because this is what the Muslim says to me when I was a kid. Muhammad is amazing. Allah is the most powerful God. So I did not start reading because I want to mock. But the second I start reading, I've noticed that this is a mockery. The book itself is a mockery for itself. I do not need even to mock it. So the Bible defends itself. We Christian, we don't defend the Bible. There's no need. But there's a difference between speaking the truth and defending God. We are not defending God. God is almighty, He is all capable. You will be punished for whatever you do. That's what we believe. It's not my duty to punish you. God will punish you. But we are here to expose lies, not to defend God. When a human, he lie, we are here to expose his lie, even if he is so-called a Christian. So if somebody, he claims something is not from the Bible, we say he's lying. If it is, it is, he's saying the truth. Even if he's a Muslim. If a Muslim, he says something is true, it's in the Bible, and he is not lying about the meaning of it, I can't say to him, you are a liar. Can I? I cannot. And this is why the Bible says, from their fruits you shall know them. And we are here to expose the fruits. When the Jews and the Muslims, they join together, and both supposedly they are the enemies of each other, right away you need to know who is the one uniting a rabbi, who the Muslim, they believe he is the enemy of Allah, and the Muslim being commanded to kill. This is what the Quran is saying. How in the world they are joining in union together? The answer is very simple. The devil is capable to make a hate unity, not love unity. You see, if they are united by love, I can say this from God. Do we agree? A unity by love is from God. A unity of hatred is from Satan. How two enemies, they want to put the teeth on each other neck, and they are now, as we speak, at war, non-stop war. Shia or Sunni. How in the world suddenly the Muslim Sunnis seek the help of the Jews to fight Christianity? How in the world they sacrifice the blood of their brothers and sisters for the sake of bringing a Jew to fight Jesus? How you claim that you defend Jesus and Mary, yet you bring somebody he insult Jesus and Mary? The answer is very simple. Islam is antichrist. Islam is satanic. The whole purpose of Islam is the same as the synagogue of Satan, is to fight Jesus. So they might appear they have two different identity, but the truth is both of them, they are one coins with two faces. One is angry because a lot of Jews accepted the Messiah. The majority of them actually already are Christians, and he could not do anything about it, so we have to lie. The other ones is the same. They're trying to fight Christianity by lying about Jesus. Muhammad has been defeated miserably. When the internet created, the Muslims, they said to themselves, oh, now we can take over. And they did in the beginning actually. No Christians really was on the internet to expose the lies of the Muslims. I was one of a few, maybe 2, 3 in the whole internet in the world, who started kicking the ass of Muhammad. And when I started, the Christians themselves, they start attacking me. You see all the names you see in the internet, they never been there. They never been, like, nobody heard of them. In fact, most of them, they were teenage, if they are not kids. We made Muhammad shish kebab in Arabic, in English, in many languages. And then the revolutionary, or let us say the snowballs getting bigger and bigger. So we started 1, 2, 3, then the 3 became 10, the 10 became 100, the 100 became 200, and God is good. The lies of Islam cannot be held together anymore. There's no cement in Islam. There's shit. Muslims, they try to cement Islam together by shit, and we expose their shit. As simple as that. And if you want to prove me wrong about what I'm saying, I will be back in a few hours live. Get me busted. Prove to me that I lied about what I just said, that Islam have no cement. But shit. Cement will hold rocks together. Rocks without cement are very fragile, even though they are rocks. But with the cement, they will make a strong wall. And I challenge the Muslim to show me the cement of Islam, if it can be located ever. That might change. So I want to see, I hope to see you again, maybe in 2 hours from now or 3 hours. I will just maybe make something to eat, lunch, whatever, before I go live, and maybe some tea or coffee, and then we will be live again 2 or 3 hours from now. God bless you. Thank you very much for being here. And again, I want the Muslim to prepare for me the cement so we can build a wall. And we will show you that there's a big hole in the narrative. God is good, so is Jesus. And we are the crusade. And see you in a few hours from now. Take care.